I thought we were just veterans. I didn't realize that it was service member veteran community. For whatever reason, I tended to think of them as blocked off period, blocked off segments. And it was, you had the guys that were active duty, you had the guys, the guys and gals that were veterans, and you had the family members, and that didn't include any of us. But in reality, now that I'm out here and now I'm seeing the way everything works and the way we do it, and especially here in Texas with the way the Texas Veterans Commission and with the way the state has moved everything together, it is an SMVF community. So we will have some, acronyms that are going along. Normally I would go through and ask, who all would tell their favorite acronym and things like that, but we can't do that right now. So these, let's see. Okay. So what do you think of when someone mentions that they served in the military? What kind of words come out? Some people, if I say something, some people would say broken. Some people would say PTSD. There's always someone that says PTSD. There's always someone that says heroic. There's always someone, there's all these different things that pop up that different people say. But then does it change at all when you start to mention it via service? What happens when I say Navy veteran or Air Force veteran or Coast Guard veteran? What happens when I start saying that? Or does your thinking even change even more when I say via a different era? For example, what kind of words do you think of when I say World War II veteran? There are different words come up. You'll hear lovable, you'll hear heroic, you'll hear, I've heard majestic, and I've heard, gallant, and all of these different words that I've heard. And then I say Vietnam veteran. What kind of things change like that? And you'll hear different sayings that different people think. And then I say, what about an Iraq veteran or an Afghanistan veteran? And then does it change if I say Desert Storm veteran? So these kind of things come up and they change and they go through, and all it is just perceptions of what way that we're reading different things, mainly put out by our communities or organizations, different things like that. So just think about that. So this page is blank, mainly for your enjoyment, or not. So show of hands right now, using the methods that we used earlier, right? How many people here, let me enlarge this a little bit. Okay, I can see a little bit more. So how many people here like the blank page? Give me a thumbs up or a crying, yes or no? Yes, thumbs up, or crying. Wow, that's a lot more people than I would think that didn't like the page, right? So, great, that's a great test for us now. Now the question is, how many people here have direct knowledge of someone who served? Now let me tell you, direct as in close family member, father, mother, brother, sister, close cousin, close uncle, close aunt, close, not a distant cousin, not someone, twice removed. So how many people here, thumbs up, have a close, direct knowledge of someone who served? So it's an even mix, I mean, it's more skewed to not as many people know, but some do, some don't. Okay, so let me close this a little bit. Oops. Does that sound good?
So I'm here today to tell you a simple story. It's a story about citizenship, responsibility, and dare I say, maybe even morality. It's a story that when I shared with some of those close to me before I came out here, they said in a very cautionary way that maybe I should not tell this story because it may make some of you feel uncomfortable. My response when I got that feedback was perfect. So here's my story. This is what I'd like to share. I have one of those jobs that unfortunately requires that I spend a lot of time on airplanes. And not too long ago, I boarded a flight like I always do, took my seat, and as I was drifting off to sleep, the pilot came over the public address system. 2 young soldiers had boarded the airplane and took seats just a few rows in front of me. And the pilot asked everyone in the plane to thank them and acknowledge their service to this country. And, there was a polite round of applause on the airplane, and those close enough to reach the 2 young men, gave them a handshake and a pat on the back. And I couldn't help but notice as this was going on, the woman sitting next to me was making a particular show of her support, so much so that I began to wonder if this was as much about her as it was those 2 soldiers. So I am a social scientist by academic training, and I have been known to do, let's say, impromptu social experiments in situations like this. So I decided at this point I was going to engage this woman in a conversation. And I told her I was a military veteran myself. I told her that today I direct a large academic institute at Syracuse University focused on the social and economic concerns of this nation's 22.5 million military veterans. And with that, she was hooked. I got her. And she travels a lot like me. And, one of the first things she said to me was that whenever she's in an airport and she sees a soldier, she makes sure to say thank you for your service. I thanked her for her gesture, but then began to subtly, or maybe not so subtly, shift the direction of the conversation a little bit to some of the challenges that are facing particularly this generation of military veterans. I told her, for example, that many of this generation of veterans, particularly the youngest, have struggled mightily to find jobs when they come home and leave service. And that maybe some of those struggles are a function of the fact that many of these young men and women who have served over the last 12 years are leaving military service with disabilities at a rate unprecedented in U.S. history. Conservatively, 30% of them will live out the rest of their lives with disabilities connected to her service. And the more I talked, the more agitated she became. But what did me in, what did the conversation in, was when I told her about the suicides. When I told her that 20% of this nation's suicides are military veterans, even though they represent less than 10% of our population. When I told her that 22 military veterans a day commit suicide in this country, 1 every 80 minutes, I told her that by the time we land, 3 more will have taken their own lives. I told her that in recent years, more veterans have died by their own hand than service members lost to the enemy in Iraq and Afghanistan. And at this point, she looked at me like I had 2 heads. And she said, none of this can be true. This isn't Vietnam. Didn't you see us clap for those soldiers? America supports our veterans. She proceeded to pull out her iPad, pop on her headphones, and turn on a rerun of Home and Garden TV. I knew it was a rerun because I like that channel. I watch those shows all the time. But she was clearly done with me. And honestly, I sat there and thought maybe I had gone too far with my little experiment. And then a young man, couldn't have been more than 24, 25 years old, sitting on the other side of the aisle, tapped me on the shoulder and looked me square in the eye, stuck out his hand, and he simply said, thanks. And it turns out his name was Tim. Tim was a military veteran. Tim volunteered and enlisted in the Marine Corps when he was 18 years old, served for 5 years. 3 of those 5 years he spent in Iraq or Afghanistan. He got out just about 6 months ago, and he had a plan. He was going to go to school. And he seemed ashamed to tell me that he only lasted about 2 months on his college campus because he said, I just didn't feel like I fit in. I didn't feel like I belonged. I had nothing in common with my classmates, with my teachers, with my administrators. He'd been trying to find a job, no luck so far, and he told me he's really hoping that the docs at the VA can figure out how to stop the ringing in his ears so he can get more than 2 or 3 hours of sleep each night. And you know what? To be very honest with you, because of what I do, I've heard all that before. None of that necessarily surprised me. But what hit me like a punch in the gut is what he said next. His eyes welled up and he said, Mike, worst of all, worse than all of that is since I've been home, I feel anonymous. And at that moment, I turned and looked at the woman who was sitting next to me, and she's lost in her reality TV. And, you know, Tim was not the only one at that moment looking for a tissue to wipe his eyes. Now home among the very people who sent him to war, he feels anonymous. I'd ask you to reflect on that for a second. In 2012, at the Aspen Institute's Ideas Festival, General Stanley McChrystal became the first senior commander of the post-9/11 generation of military leaders to make a public call for a return to the draft. His argument was never again should the costs and consequences of war be so disconnected from society and its citizens. Nobody paid him any attention. It made the news for about a day. So post-Vietnam, it was America's response to Vietnam that largely served as the impetus for the creation of the all-volunteer force. After Vietnam, the idea of conscription and mandatory military service for all was widely rejected by all Americans. Still today, it is the all-volunteer force model that has the overwhelming support of Americans and, quite honestly, most military leaders. Importantly, however, we are coming off the first extended test of the all-volunteer force. And as with any test, it's my hope, and certainly our collective hope, that we may have learned something. Let me tell you what I have learned. What I have learned is that the moral outrage that galvanized much of America after Vietnam was subsequently translated into policy and then practice in a way that actually runs counter to the idea that war is something to be avoided at all costs. In fact, the all-volunteer force makes it much too easy for us to leverage military conflict as an instrument of public policy. Since 1973, when the all-volunteer force was enacted, our leaders have actually used force as an instrument of policy at an escalating rate. In the 40 years since the all-volunteer force has been in existence, our military leaders have sent our men and women of the military into harm's way 134 separate times. In the 40 years prior to the all-volunteer force, when all of our citizens were responsible for our defense, our leaders used force 24 times. Why is Tim anonymous? Tim is anonymous because we have disconnected the costs and consequences of war from all of you. Over the course of the last 12 years at war, the burden of that war has been shouldered by less than 1% of all Americans. Because of that fact, odds are Tim is not your brother, your father, your son, your neighbor, your classmate, your teammate. He's probably not even your friend. And because of that fact, far too many Americans are not invested in Tim's future. But let me tell you, Tim is somebody. Tim is the somebody that we, all of you, collectively entrusted and conferred this nation's moral compass when you sent him off to find, fight, and kill our enemies. And now he's home. And just like that woman sitting next to me on the airplane, not enough of you, not enough of us are invested in his future. So here's the thing. Let me tell you about Tim. History and those who have come before Tim have proven to history that he's smart, educated, resourceful, and entrepreneurial. He wants to be a leader in your communities, on your campuses, and in your governments. He's mature beyond his years, he's honest to a fault, and he's fiercely loyal. Sure, war has changed him, but on so many dimensions, more for the better than for the worse. Thomas Jefferson said that a nation as a society forms a moral person, and that all members are responsible for society. I stand here and attest to you today that when you made the decision to defer the defense of this country to Tim, you made a moral choice that incurs a moral obligation. What is that obligation? It's a very, very simple thing. It's the only thing that Tim wants from you. Tim wants you to know him. I implore you, find a way to know Tim. Thank you.
So did anything there strike anybody? I mean, just kind of just smack you in the face about some of those things? And for those of you who don't know, that's Dr. Hein. He is the director of the Institute for Veterans and Military Families at Syracuse University. And for those of you who don't know, they have a program there where when I was the Student Veteran Association or Student Veterans of America president at UNT, we were able to get some computers from him or from that organization. They got us some computers to help out our student vets and put them into one room and kind of set up a lab there, make it a little bit better than what it was already, although UNT was doing a lot for us then too. You know, some of the things that he spoke about was, you know, the legacy factor. And that was the whole reason why I asked about people having that direct connection with the veterans that we know, and whether we have they're a direct relative or someone that, you know, we deal with every day, or are they just somebody who we know as, oh yeah, that's Fred. He's worked here 20 years. He was an Army vet. You know, thank you for your service. Have a good day. There is a difference, and a lot of times, I believe it was Time Magazine had an article out that they published in 2013 that was talking about 98%. They asked a couple thousand veterans, and 98% of them said that they wanted to have be a part of something that was bigger than themselves. They wanted to be a part of something where they gave back to their communities. They wanted to serve again, and be able to show that they were useful to their communities and not just some schmo that's out there, you know, living in the community only. Any questions at all so far? Go ahead and put them in chat, and you know, we can go through. Okay, so these are the different seals of the different organizations that make up the U.S. military. Now, there are different seals for the National Guard and the Air Force Reserve, you know, on the different reserves and the different reserve units, things like that. But this is the 5 components that make up the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, and the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard is actually under the Department of Homeland Security, but during time of war, they can come under the Department of the Navy. So, and when I was stationed overseas in Yemen, when we flew into Yemen to drop off some stuff for the USS Cole, the Coast Guard was actually there protecting the harbors after it was an incident had happened, but they came in swiftly and secured down that area so that we didn't have to worry about other attacks happening after that. So the Army was started in June 14, 1775. They are called soldiers. They fight and win our nation's war by providing prompt, sustained land dominance across the full range of military operations and a spectrum of conflict, and provide that spectrum of conflict in support of combatant commanders. Their core values are loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. There's the Marine Corps, which founding date was November 10th, 1775. They call themselves Marines. They train, organize, and equip Marines for for offensive amphibious employment and as a force in readiness. Their core values are honor, courage, and commitment. They also go, once Marine, always Marine. So anytime you talk to a Marine, you don't ask them, are you an ex-Marine? No, no, no. Once a Marine, always a Marine. So and then there's the Navy. And it may be funny because the Marine Corps is under the Department of Navy, even though they don't admit it, but they admit it one time a year, the Army-Navy game. So, but the Department of the Navy actually has its founding date after that fact because, little trivia, even though they were started before the Marine Corps, there was a part there where the Navy was kind of disestablished after when we reestablished the new Congress, and then they started back up again. So their actual date is, or the date that they claim is October 13th, 1775, after the Marine Corps. So that's why the symbols are different. They call themselves sailors. Maintain, train, and equip combat-ready naval forces capable of winning wars, deterring aggression, and maintaining freedom of the seas. Their core values are honor, courage, and commitment. And then there's the Air Force. Their birth date is September 18th, 1947. They call themselves airmen. They fly, fight, and win in air, space, and cyberspace. Their core values are integrity first, service before self, and excel in all we do. And then there's the Coast Guard. Their birth date is August 4th, 1790. They're called Coast Guardsmen. They safeguard the nation's maritime interests. Honor, respect, and devotion to duty are their core values. So not every service member is a soldier. And that's one of the main points that ends up happening with, those of us who deal in this environment when we're talking to veterans and talking to different people from different areas. I tend to hear a lot of different things that say, so what was it like being, what was it like being a soldier? What was it like, doing this? And then, yeah, I wasn't a soldier, And once you start off with that footing, it becomes kind of hard to gain that credibility back. So what we normally try to do is we train ourselves to say service members. We train ourselves to say service members until we know what branch they served in. And then at that point, we kind of start to know, okay, if I'm speaking to someone who is a Marine, then after that, instead of saying, what branch of service were you in? Or what was it like being a service member? And then once they tell me what they were or going through, then I can say, okay, so what was it like being a soldier? What was, or okay, Marine, what do we do here? Or, so then you start to begin to know the language, and then they're actually understanding, okay, this person knows there's a difference between the different services, what's going on. They know that not everybody's a soldier. And there are some people who think that they can use that. And because it is listed in the dictionary as anyone who served in the armed forces of the military, that's not necessarily true. That's one good way to lose that credibility very quickly. This goes a long way in building that rapport. Soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and coasties. I'm sorry, guardsmen. But this is also used by the National Guard at times. So sometimes it can be confusing even for those that are in it. So sometimes you will hear some people say guardsmen, and I would recommend that you try to find out exactly, it's like, was that National Guard or Coast Guard? And then kind of go on from there. Unlike Hollywood, not every service member is proficient with a weapon, in other words, a gun. It is their mission to be good at their job. In real life, you don't find Navy SEALs who got in trouble and become cooks for their skippers, for the skipper of the boat. If they got into that much trouble, they're either dishonorably separated or they're in jail, and then they're dishonorably separated. Because of this, and the public expectation of it, you find in many cases that there are service members or veterans out there who will exaggerate that part of their training. But once you realize their job is to be good at their job. Everything else is taken care of for them for the most part. You know, housing, different things like that. So their job is to go in. Now that becomes a little bit different with the reserve and the National Guard components. But this is the numbers that we use today for this. They perform, reserve soldiers perform part-time duties as opposed to full-time active duties. So here are the active components right here. And these numbers are actually updated to 2019 numbers, beginning of 2019. So you have the active component numbers here, and then you have the reserve components here. Just look at them and, you know, see that while they seem pretty large, if you think about the grand scheme of everywhere that we have people and everywhere that we are, those are actually pretty small numbers. Those are way smaller numbers than what we could imagine. But for the most part, almost everyone does an initial 8-year contract. For the most part, there are some other contracts that are going in. 4 years active duty, 4 years reserve or inactive duty. So a lot of times, if you're talking to someone who just got out a year before, they probably still got a little bit more IRR time. It's called inactive ready reserve time that they're doing. So in other words, they can get called back during that whole time frame, but they're kind of going through and doing that. I'm sorry, it's not inactive ready reserve. It's individual ready reserve. That's what it is. So then, if you're dealing with active duty, you are dealing with someone who is there 24/7. That's their job. That's what they do. This is, you know, that's what they're supposed to be doing at all times. Doesn't matter what time they're called, they're supposed to go in. But when you're dealing with reserve, you are dealing with part-time. So you have typical, they do a weekend, 1 weekend per month, which is currently called a drill weekend. I believe the Army calls it the Army Reserve calls it a battle assembly. But almost everybody else calls it a drill weekend. And then they do 2 continuous weeks sometime during that year, known as their annual training. There are times where they can get called up for doing different things, active duty wise, and then it becomes where they actually get transferred to the active duty side, and it's either an individual augment or it's a assignment or active duty training, ADT. And then when they're done with that, they go back to being reserved. So you can actually see them some of you folks are asking for a DD-214, you can actually see 2 or 3 of those because of the fact that they're doing a couple of those. Okay, so then we get into the National Guard. Weekend warriors, you know, these are the things that different people say about that, but should we really say those terms for them? When you realize this, that nationwide, the National Guard comprises approximately 1/2 of the U.S. Army's available combat forces. Let me say that again. Nationwide, the Army National Guard comprises approximately 1/2 of the U.S. Army's available combat forces and approximately 1/3 of its support organization. Whereas, like in the Navy, the Naval Reserve comprises 75% of their logistics support and comprises 100% of their heavy lift logistics support. So anytime you see a C-130 bringing in a big old thing and it says Navy on the side of it, that is a mixed crew of active duty and reserve. It is assigned to a reserve unit, but it may be flown by just all active duty people who are assigned to that reserve unit. And it is their job to train the reservists and also fulfill the missions. So we can't necessarily call these people weekend warriors anymore, because if you think about that, when the Army or anyone else gets deployed downrange and they get deployed to wherever they're going, you have to realize that the majority of the military police in the Army are actually National Guard. So they may get deployed with this group. And then they come back and then they get deployed out again. And then they come back and they get deployed out again. So on the big scheme of things, all they're seeing is all these different divisions getting deployed. But in the grand scheme of things, at that bottom level, that unit may get deployed out 5 or 6 times in a row, which is one of the things that they're now realizing with the National Guard. And they're going, oh, we're deploying these guys a little bit more than we're deploying some of our active duty people. So the only problem was that because they are National Guard, it was kind of hard to separate the two and everything. The good thing that happened was at the tail end of the Obama administration, they had come out with 2018. So whatever administration it was, 2018, they had come out with a thing saying the National Guard is now considered veterans. You can use the MB-22, I believe it is, and as a DD-214. But when they get deployed out with these big units, the big Army units, they're going to get a DD-214 anyway, which says that they were active duty. Hope I didn't confuse anybody on that. So the ranks are all the same, and kind of going along through that. The Air National Guard works the same way as the Army National Guard, only it works for the Air Force. Now, all these National Guard units do work for their governors of their state, and they can get called up to the federal level, and they cannot be called for longer than, I believe it's 90 days, unless there is a federal mandate by Congress. Now, what does this all mean? This all means that some of these groups are going out 29 days, coming back. They're home for 2 weeks, and then they go back out for another 29 days, so that they don't break those barriers, because they're being utilized by a big Army, big Navy, all these others. And so that actually, think about what that does to a home. Think about what that would do to you and your spouse if your wife came home and said, "Hi, honey, I'm home for a week and I'm gone, but I got to do training for, I got to go do training for this next week so I can get ready to get deployed." So your spouse is only home for a couple of days at that point. So imagine what that does. That definitely puts the stress on them and their families, because they're trying to do their job, they're trying to complete their whole mission, and their family is just going, well, he or she is here, but they're not here. So, any questions at all? I feel like I'm just kind of, I don't like not doing this in person. Okay, so forging the warrior from the civilian, 8 to 12 week process, right? So we talk about 8 to 12 week process because if you make it to boot camp, get assigned to a boot camp thing, and then the day you graduate, that might be 8 weeks. Sometimes you get there and you got to wait for all the divisions to form up. So all the companies form up, and then they form a division, and then you're trying to figure out all this stuff. And once they're ready to start, they all start together so they can all graduate together. So if you show up at the very beginning when they're starting to form everything, you could be there for 4 weeks before you even start boot camp. So can you imagine doing boot camp for 4 weeks before you even officially start? that can get kind of ranky. And this is not your normal day at the local CrossFit gym or working in a bank, school, or grocery store. Most people can't understand why there is such an issue with veterans leaving the military and becoming a civilian again. You have to realize that boot camp is only the beginning in the process of creating a warrior, and that each service defines that prerequisite even further, even to the point of defining it in different subsects such as Army Rangers, Recon Marines, Navy SEALs, Air Force combat controllers, and even Coast Guard rescue swimmers. These are considered elite. All of these lead and are fed through a system that constantly exemplifies honor, courage, mission completion, and results. This also leads to what some call arrogance, and sometimes even overconfidence. Why is this? Well, one reason is because of the way that service members are trained. Most times it is a sink or swim, do or do not type system. You either keep up or you're dropped, and then you got to do something else. It requires a lot of self-discipline to do that. So imagine this. Imagine you're sitting at work and your boss is telling you got to do something and you have to do it specifically just right. And they're yelling at you and they're constantly on you and they're constantly doing and they're constantly going through and they're constantly. Can you imagine what you would think of? Most people are like, I couldn't do that. I'd have to hit them. Well, there's nothing that says you can't, right? Because you're told from the very beginning that that you are not supposed to do certain. You cannot talk bad. You cannot do these things. So imagine that you're going through that. Imagine that you're going through that, and can you? In reality, you can always take a swing at them, right? But then you're told from the very beginning that even though you can quit at any time you want, even though you can do something like that, especially at high performance training times where it seems like they're trying to make you quit. But you also told that the consequences from the very beginning and that those who can exercise discipline, that's who they want. They want you to exercise self-discipline and think before doing something rash. So that's the people that they're trying to get. So they are trying to make some of these people quit or fire themselves by breaking their self-discipline and not doing what they need to do. The other thing that is introduced and heavily hit upon in boot camp is the concept of team. From the very beginning, when you first form up on that line, or you step on those little yellow footsteps, until the moment you leave, whether it's 2 years, 4 years, 20 years, or even 30 years later, you're never really alone. You may be physically alone sometimes, but there's always someone assigned to you, whether that's a battle buddy, swim buddy, or even liberty buddy. Think about this. There are times when before you even get to a base, someone's calling you and you'll be like, hello? And they say, yes, I'm your sponsor. You're supposed to be coming in on this day, or whenever it is that you come in, get in touch with me. I'm your command sponsor. Please do that. On those commands that actually worked it right, your sponsor called you before you got there. Some commands, I know for myself, some commands I showed up and they said, oh, yeah, hey, you're his sponsor now. And it was like, well, gee, thanks. I feel happy about this, But still, it wasn't that, I wasn't left alone to just run around and do these things by myself. There was somebody, in theory, that I could go to and ask for help and have someone assigned to me that was there to help me, in theory. It didn't always happen, depending on the command that you were in. But you have to realize this process takes 8 to 12 weeks, and that there's even more training that can take up to a year or more before you even get to your command and actually doing your work. And this is to make the recruit a strong candidate for future units and turn them into a valuable asset. Now compare that to when you're leaving the military and you only get 1 to 3 weeks of training to do that transition. And normally at this point, I'll ask people, what they think about the different, which photo here kind of, speaks to them and goes through. The Marines always love the bottom one, or the bottom left, with hitting each other, doing things like that. I don't know why, but that's Marines. Gotta love them.
Above the waterline are aspects of a culture that are explicit, visible, and easily taught. The surface culture is where behaviors, customs and courtesies, and traditions are more easily seen. For the military culture, this area includes things such as the uniform and rank, the salute, the playing of the national anthem before commanders' calls and movies, the POW ceremony, the honoring of heroes, and the change of command ceremony. At the waterline is a transition zone where the observer has to be more alert, the area where implicit understanding becomes talked about and where ethos is codified into creed. At this level of military culture are found the service creeds, the core values, and the oath of office. Some of what identifies service members and veterans as belonging to the military culture are not readily apparent and exist below the waterline. Below the surface is the hidden culture, the more enduring and powerful characteristics of the military culture, the beliefs, habits, values, assumptions, understandings, and judgments that affect the culture's worldview. These intangible values and guiding ideals that are mostly acquired while in uniform and are often kept for life are referred to as the military or warrior ethos. These are often things a member knows but cannot easily articulate. The hidden aspects of a culture are not taught directly.
So these are things that we're talking about. You know, I've shown examples of them before, and we've talked about the different examples. We talked about, you know, wearing the uniforms, you know, different things like that. There's also little things that sometimes just kind of get embedded into you, kind of what he was talking about. They're not explicitly taught to you, but they're ingrained into you to a certain point to where it becomes natural habit. One of them, which I've been able to break, thankfully, is the hair length. So when you're talking to somebody, the way that I can tell on different people, whether they're, you know, when I'm talking to them or anything, a lot of times if they still have their hair really short and they have it real cut, you know, really tight, high and tight kind of, and this and that, what you can normally tell is if you can still see the white wall, you know, it's down to skin, almost skin down here, they're Marines. But if it's like right on the edge of touching their ears and everything, they still got the beard going on. They all still got the Duck Dynasty beard going on and everything. But if you can see the white wall, they're Marines. And if it's almost touching, then they're probably Army. Whereas, you know, for myself, I'm the long-haired hippie. At least that's what the Marines called us when we were in the Navy. So, you know, all these different things. One of the things, too, is right here. I guess I didn't think about it anything. Katasha was talking about the gas chamber was something that, you know, she really he struck upon. That's the, you know, first thing that got her right there. Yeah. You have to realize that when you walked into that gas chamber, you were not allowed to get out of that gas chamber. You were all lined up. They drop the chemical in. You start tearing up, starts forming and, you know, goes down the front of your shirt. And you have your gas mask off, and then you take it off, and you're supposed to be holding it. And then when the instructor comes up, they come up in front of you and ask you certain questions. They'll ask you general orders. Sometimes they'll ask you for your name, rank, and serial number, you know, your social security number. And so you're kind of just going through all that and everything else. So yeah, I think I tried to forget about that one. So okay, so continuous training for war. Make no mistake that the purpose of the military is to be prepared for and win battles. This is a result of political or economic or even ideological reasons. Think about the video that we saw. How many times in the past, in the 40 years after the all-volunteer force, it was like 134 or something like, or 137 or something like that. 137 times the military has been used as an expression of politics, whereas the 40 years prior to the all-volunteer force, it was 24 times. You know, that's why you have a lot of people calling back for the draft and non-volunteer. This is the result of political or economic or even ideological reasons, but that is neither the reason nor the domain of the military service member. They are training to win a war. This is singularly the main objective, and each unit has specific goals and method to do their part that needs to be accomplished in order to bring about this concept. They can, what I mean by that is that they change up the deployment cycles. You have some units that deploy out for 18 months. You have others that deploy out for 6 months. Why is there a difference? Well, one is because of manpower. One is because of the manpower. The other one is because of, it could be just different reasons, just logistical. It could be that their unit might be needed somewhere else. And so they go on a deployment somewhere else, they do what they need to do here, and then they go back. And then when we were in Balad, there were times where we had to wait on one of the construction battalions to come back through so that they could either build us something or the Air Force has I think it's the Red Horse. That's their civil engineering organization that comes through, and they build them nice units, nice buildings and everything like that. And we're still living in these tents that we called the booger because they were just big green blobs, and they would help us out as much as they could, but it all depended. So it all depended upon the different specific units. The deployment cycles could be different. It all depended upon the work and the job performance of each person. You have the differences in each unit trying to make that person good at their job. become the best at their job. There's an old joke that says, what's the best unit that you've ever been in? The one you just left, and then all the officers in your unit say, you're the best, you are the best, and they weren't lying to you. You were the best at that point. What your job was to do your job, and so you were the tip of the spear. You were the best at what you were doing there. And then you come out here, and that's no longer the case because missions are muddled and there's other things. The other thing was being able to identify people by what they do, how they do, and you could see where they were at. So one of them was by identifying the uniform. So even in the basic working uniform, the Navy called it the Navy working uniform. I believe the Army called it the ACUs. And everybody else just called it camis. So in the camouflage uniform, you had bare minimum even up here, but you could still see what they had done, what their specialty warfare badges were, and everyone wore them. The Air Force, Navy, Marines, all of them had their specialty warfare insignias right above their name. So or service name was over here, but you knew exactly what they had done or where they were at or different things. But when people showed up and you were wearing 4 ribbons and for everything else, you knew, hey, that guy's been there. That guy's done this. She's pretty bad. I want to mess with her. All these different things that you knew that that person had been through. And now you're kind of going through and looking at people, and you're like, I don't know if they're up for this or not. And you can't have that instant tell that tells you, okay, they've been through this. If they got that, I know what they've been through. A little bit different out here. So sometimes that needs to be explained. Have you ever noticed that some veterans take everything to the extreme? Maybe it's because that they use, in the military, we would use that planning for the absolute possible worst case scenario. That's what you plan for. You plan for the worst case. This is the subject matter of most of our training. Train for the worst and accomplish the best, right? So if it wasn't the worst, if it was like this, you're like, that's simple. If I could do this, I could take care of that. Well, a lot of times you will have people who are trained that way to immediately think of the worst case scenario and then start coming back from it. No matter how many years you do that, once you get into that mindset, that becomes the continual mindset. So that may be one of the reasons why someone is going to that extreme every single time. Just food for thought. So let's see. Am I doing good? How's everybody? I'm used to feedback by now, It's like silence. I'm like, okay, is everybody asleep? So, yep. So thank you, Charlene, for saying that. And the VROC, yay, thank you. VA North Texas Woods. So combat deployments. I already talked about how some of the different deployment cycles are kind of going through. I've also talked about the National Guard being back to back, different things. You have the Naval Reserve, since they provide 100 or 75% of logistics and 100% of the heavy lift. They are constantly deploying. Every 3 months, they were gone. We saw them somewhere in the world. And like I said, it's because of not being able to deploy that reservist out for however long. The active duty would take over that spot. So they deploy out with a group of active duty and reserve people, and then the reserve people would fly home, and more active duty and more reserve people would come through. And while the aircraft was still in theater, the active duty people will continue on with the work. So they might actually get deployed every for 6 months, and the reserve people are being changed out every 2 weeks. So it just depends. You have these different mindsets and different ways that people view the same event differently, and that may be one of the reasons why. Now let's consider the service member that goes to war. Have you ever heard or used the phrase "war is hell"? There's 100% truth in that statement. Can you imagine what it's like to go to work and not be able to leave? I know. In the mental health field, sometimes it feels like we can't ever go home, right? You're, oh, I'm never making it home. Especially with these funky new therapies that they're having us come out with, right? All these different things that they want us to do. But think about this. Seriously, imagine after work, your only choices are to go see a movie with your coworkers. Go to the exchange shopping with your coworkers. Go to the gym with your coworkers, or go have the allotted 1 or 2 beers rationed out, and once again, with your coworkers, right? Can you imagine that? And then before you go to your rack or anything, you're in a big tent, also with your gender-specific coworkers. Never, ever getting away from them. Sometimes you kind of want to be alone, right? At that point, can you imagine a work environment that is so hazardous that you have to carry a weapon and wear body armor, or sometimes a chemical warfare suit 24/7? People who've been in the chemical warfare suit, they're like, this mask ain't got nothing on me. All this stuff that we're having to do now. Can you imagine that? There used to be little fittings that we had to put in to be able to drink water from our camelbacks. So let's see. Can you imagine not being able to call your wife or your husband, or for some of us not being able to call your son or daughter for weeks? Can you imagine experiencing combat trauma and having to keep moving without being able to process that event? Or even harder, you losing a comrade and not being able to grieve until later at the appropriate time. Most of us know that it's hard to lose a friend, here at home. Just think about if you lost them and you feel a sense of responsibility for their fate, but you can't acknowledge it until sometime later at the designated time. You have to bury that so that you can move on and get to that, and get through with that mission. Sometimes that happens. So what is allowed for appropriate grieving? Well, so during the middle of a mission is not considered an appropriate time to grieve. Especially if you're, like, let's say everything's done and you're kind of going through, because I was a driver in Balad for a little while. So, if everything's done, you can't, you don't think about it. You continue on with your mission, right? Yeah, you go through, you're doing all this stuff. And then when you get back home, when you get back to base, the fob, you got gear you got to clean, you got stuff you got to take care of. Everything has to be taken care of first, and then you might be released. At some points, you might be, you might have to do a after action report, or you might have to get together and talk about different things. Tell about where you were doing this, doing that, get debriefed on different things. A debriefing normally. Most people think in terms of someone telling you, this and that. No, it's the other way around. You have to tell them everything that went on and what was going on, and and then they're asking questions, normally a standard set of questions that they have to, because they have an objective that they're trying to find out. So you're trying to tell them about how it feels and how bad it is and everything, and they don't want to know that. They want to know, how many people did you see on a bicycle? How many people did you see carrying around backpacks? Things like that. That's the different things like that. I hope that answers that. Okay. So then we start talking about, what about the families? How does the military service affect the families? Can you imagine in any of those deployments that your husband or wife leaves, and it does take a certain mindset, and even out of boot camp, even if you weren't an A type personality, you're a very strong B plus type personality coming out of boot camp, right? Because you're taught you're taught that it's supposed to, that you're supposed to be strong, that you're supposed to be, project this air about you and everything like that. So a lot of times the service member is the one that is doing a lot of the head of household duties in different families. Well, what happens when they leave? Now the spouse has to take over. Whether it's male or female, all of a sudden that person now has to do everything by themselves, because sometimes that service member can't be reached, right? They can't, that service member can't be reached in the, going through. So imagine every time that person comes back home, and now they're trying to take back over the duties, and they've been gone for 6 months to 18 months. And this husband or wife has been everything, mom and dad, for the past 6 to 18 months. And now this person's trying to come back in and take over everything from the beginning. Sometimes that's what causes, that little headbutting going through. So keep that in mind with the different families when you are talking to the families and you are talking to, the service member. They may say it is, something else is going on or something, but sometimes it's just as simple as them trying to take back over the head of household title, and that can cause different things. So let's see. There it is. Yes. No. Okay.
And started crying in the hallway.
Okay.
As a spouse or a loved one of a soldier, it takes a lot of backbone yourself. Somebody's always in harm's way, and that's stressful. I was scared. I broke down and started crying in the hallway.
The family gets torn apart, pulled in so many different directions.
I didn't notice a lot of things right away, except that he was a little kind of distant. When he got back from Iraq, he pulled guard on the window every thunderstorm for about a year.
We'd get into the arguments. Things came out where I was like, this has nothing to do with us. And I realized it really feels like she's got something going on here too.
I think one of the toughest things is to actually acknowledge that you might just need to talk to somebody.
I know you think that maybe it's not very macho to say I need help, but I know you do, and I do too. And if you could just do this for me.
You can only lead as far as you've gone. So you need to go yourself and see what the VA is like. And she did.
Anyone can be supportive, your family, your friends, but what's lacking is that connection with someone who's going through the exact same thing. And until you can find that, you're not going to feel that sense of like, oh, like you get it. There's the VA. There's also places like the Vet Center. There are private counseling that is offered to them.
He started realizing that, he's not the only person, and it really kind of opened up some doors so that then we could talk.
There is so much more help out there and understanding than you'd even realize. Even if it's just a friend or a family member or just a hotline, do something.
Any questions at all whatsoever? I mean, I hope I'm not putting you to sleep. Hopefully this is decent usable material. Okay, normally we would go on a break, we'd go through and everything like that, but I'll just go ahead. Since you're at home, go take your own breaks. So now we're at veteran knowledge. This one is about 9 minutes long. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. And Elizabeth Lee, thank you for what you said on there. Thank you for what you're talking about in chat and going through. The other thing I wanted to say was Chris was talking about the first responders, how a lot of times they have to also put aside the trauma or the grief of whatever it is that they're dealing with, and then complete their mission for that day of whatever else it is. This is about a 9-minute video. It is kind of dated. It's 2009, but it's still pretty relevant on this. What you'll find surprising is that the number, well, you'll see. So like I said, this video is a little bit dated, but those numbers have only gone up, for the most part, unfortunately. I think the number for veteran suicide per day is back down to 19 or 18 a day. I don't know, VA, you correct me if I'm wrong on that. I've tried to get this. This was a group called vetsprevail.org. I've tried to get them to make an updated version of them. I've sent them emails and said, please make an updated version of this video. Can't do it. But if, maybe if more of us actually ask them, they could, actually do that for us and everything. Good, informative video. I like the way the ending of it was so positive of how they did throw that caveat in there, those without mental health issues are boom, boom, boom. But just one of my favorites here. Okay, and thank you, Joy, for what you said also on that, the chat. So this program that I'm giving you here was kind of set up for the, because we do classes for different organizations and sometimes for businesses on how to hire veterans, how to spot them, how to recruit them, how to bring them in, and how to keep them. How to retain the veterans, what they're doing that's repelling veterans, all these different things. And so some of those actually might be useful to you guys, because not everyone on here is a veteran service organization. So you're not tied in with an organization that is already, in the vetosphere. Hey, new word. So let's go through. Some of the suggestions to this far-reaching question of how do we communicate with veterans is show more than just a passing, interest, display some knowledge, veteran rank structure and how they are organized, keep to set instructions and materials to obtain information, and keep those communication lines open, right? So what does this all mean? Well, understand that this is a question being asked by hundreds, even thousands of organizations who want the SMVF interests for their nonprofits, businesses, and government agencies. What is meant by more than just a passing interest? This can be different symbols. This can be flags, photos of uniform, or people in uniforms in different places, so that they know that they're walking in and it isn't just a clinic or whatever, but there's actually people there who, they walk in and go, oh, people in uniform on the walls. I don't know who they are, but good. I feel a little bit, better about this. They kind of understand, where I'm coming from, different things like that. Just the ways of being able to bring down that anxiety level from the beginning of, you just don't understand, you haven't been there, but you're in an area that kind of exemplifies where you were at, what you were doing. Flags sometimes can be a really big way of making the veterans feel at ease. So I have a running joke that kind of says, and it's kind of true actually, not really a joke, but it's if you want to find out where the Marines are within a half mile of you, are run up a Marine Corps flag. They will find you. Same thing with Coast Guardsmen. You throw up a Coast Guard flag, and man, they show up. You don't know where they're at, but you do have those different things. Sometimes it's the photos of people in uniform. They're like, oh, well, who are they? And I actually have an answer for that. Let's see. One of the prime examples is that Home Depot. They go out with the veteran organizations, and they're wearing their Home Depot uniform, but they're with different veteran organizations, and they're doing that. And it kind of helps to know that they have almost like a rank structure set up so that they can interact with us and do different things. They've been on different job builds with us, especially with the Mission Continues or Team Rubicon or any of those that I've been with. Those Home Depot guys, they got it down. Same thing with Lockheed. They do the same thing. It helps that a lot of veterans are there with them, so they're the ones that are normally taking charge of that. Many veterans feel that companies at most places are just giving lip service to them for some type of public relations stunt. State up front. How many people are there, or how what's going on there, or how they relate to providing that service to the public or even to the veterans themselves. Also remember that if it is not expressly Uh, Elaine Taylor, listen for the big Semper Fi. That is true. She knows Marines. But state of, let's see, what, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought here. So where was I? Oh, remember that if it is not expressly written as no, then it may be open for interpretation. For example, many of the units that I was in, we lived and died by the axiom, forgiveness is easier than permission, right? If it didn't say no, it didn't necessarily mean that you could or could do it. It just depended on what was going on. Whether you could get away with it or not sometimes was the case. But if it said no, you could not do it. Because most of the time it was written in blood for that reason, right? Somebody said, don't do this because they either got hurt or killed doing it. So that was why no means no. But everything else is kind of open for interpretation. Many veterans complain that they follow the instructions of whatever organization that they're trying to work with or get in touch with, but then they change the format or how they're reached or something else. And then at that point, you have to understand that these people just came up from a world of rules, and that when written, they were set in stone. From the very beginning, it is said over and over that if someone took the time to write it down, it was because it is written in blood. That's the saying over and over again, Let's see, communication or lack thereof is a huge complaint for many veterans. So realize this, even awards boards that denied you, that said, no, you didn't make it, they still somehow got a message to you saying, yeah, you didn't make it. Whether it was through the chain of command or sometimes they sent out letters and saying, these people made it and these people didn't. And you're like, ooh, sad to see your name written down there, but you knew that you didn't make it, right? Whatever it was that you were trying to do. So, and a lot of times, most of the time in classes, you see, especially if it was a pass fail, or they would say go, no go, and you'd have, your name, go, and then no, no go, no go, no go. And I won't talk about, I'm going to trigger myself if I go through that. So this is the #1 complaint on the message boards about that, right? Being able to communications lines not being open, or instructions or set rules, ways to obtain things not being followed. And then we start talking about rank and job title. So why, why is rank so important? And why do I have job title in there afterward? So the main thing is rank is crucial. So rank is crucial because a lot of it says what you can and can't say, what you can and can't do, and this and that. But job title is even more important than rank. So I remember when I first went in, I got qualified on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier in '92, I believe it was. And so here I was, still 18 years old. I think it was 18 years old. Kind of running through. I got qualified at night because I got in trouble, so I was put on the night crew. And so running around at night, most dangerous job in the world. It was running around at night on a flight deck at night, much less as a trainee. So I'm being followed around. Somebody's, I'm holding onto the belt sometimes, and sometimes, I'm trying to walk around and get smacked in the back of the head. I'd stop what I'm doing and I'd look for whoever my trainer was, and they'd point to where I needed to go, and I'd go that way. Because they could be right here, I could yell, and they still could not hear me on the flight deck, right? So a lot of times it was smack, the Jethro Leroy Gibbs method of school, of instruction there. Now those of you teaching at home, don't use that method. Please don't do that. Don't say I told you to do that. But it goes through a lot of times. That was the way we had to do things. And I remember I got qualified really quickly. Everybody was like, wow, this and that. And the next thing you know, they gave me a trainee. My trainee was a senior chief who was an E8. So here I am, E3, E8, way above me, who was 22 years older than me, right? So to me, that guy was ancient. That guy was an old guy, and he was, he told the chief what to do. What am I going to do, So I had to treat him, I was going along trying to treat him with kid gloves. And then after a while, it was the same thing. Just, pow, get over here, keep him from killing himself, doing this and that, get him qualified, get him set up. And then as soon as he got qualified, he went. I don't know why he got qualified. He didn't have to work out there afterward or anything else. But I had to make sure that he survived and that he was qualified and trained to do what he needed to do. But I also had to learn that the second that we walked through those doors, he was senior chief again. You know, I couldn't tell him, I couldn't talk to him in certain ways in the way he went through. But my job title out on the flight deck allowed me to supersede all of his rank and take charge of him. So I think what we do is we kind of start this conversation off wrong when we go from whatever it is, whatever our rank is, whatever our job title is, going into becoming, going into the civilian world. We start that conversation wrong. We think in terms of going back to being a civilian, right? And in reality, that's kind of a, it's kind of a negative connotation. First of all, it says we're going backwards, right? We were a civilian before we went to the military. We were a uniformed service member, and now we're going back to being a civilian. I'm sorry, but I, for one, feel like I am never going to be a civilian again. I'm sure a lot of the veterans that are out there think the same way. The majority of them that I've talked to think the same way. And in reality, society will not let us become a civilian again. Think of it in terms of this. If I was to do something stupid and end up on your TV screen, and they say, Domingo Rodriguez, Joe Schmo did this, right? They don't normally say that, right? Joe Schmo civilian did this. They normally say, Domingo Rodriguez, U.S. Navy veteran, did this. Domingo Rodriguez, U.S. military veteran, did that, right? So even in those terms, they won't let us be the civilian again, okay? But the other side of that too is that as a military member, like I said, your job, your mission was your job, and your job was your life. It didn't matter whether you were, whether it was 4 a.m. and you just got off of work, or it was 7 a.m. and you had a day off. If they called you, you went in. I remember one time we had just gotten off, we went to the bar, we're doing whatever, and they called and said, hey, come in. And I'm like, I'm drunk. And they said, doesn't matter, find a way. Okay. You know, having to hang up, all these different things, because you had to go in. Your mission was your job, and your job was your life. Think about that. When you're doing that for 2 years straight, 4 years straight, 20 years straight, and that's the way you think about it, and everything else kind of goes along, it does become your identity, right? So as you're going through, now you get out, and now what are we told out here? We're told you keep your life and keep your work, and never the two are supposed to meet, right? You're supposed to keep them separated. Well, first of all, if you're used to working 14, 16 hours a day, and you spend all your time at work, and you're not counting that as part of your life, then what is your life? Eating, pooping, and sleeping. That's it, right? And second of all, if you have work here and you have life here, where is mission? Where is mission and all that? Because remember, mission was your job, and your job was your life. So where's the mission and all that? And I think a lot of people kind of, when you've led a life of mission, when you led a life of purpose, you start to find that you begin to miss that sort of thing. And yes, thank you, Katasha, for talking about that. She talks about the MOS and the NEC. It's the military occupational specialty and the Navy enlisted classifications. So that right there, your job title, whatever job you're doing, you get a 4-digit number, and it tells whatever it was that you were doing. And then you can look up in the book, and it'll tell what the official job title of whatever it is that you're doing. You know, it could be something as simple as infantryman, basic, you know, and then it could be as you know, communications specialist, cryptologic, blah blah blah, all this other stuff with 15 other things behind it. But it came down to just doing your job, and so that told basically what your mission was, unless your mission of your unit was something different. Okay. And I don't want to ignore Lib, because she's absolutely right with that, explaining the see one, do one, teach one. That was the big thing with us in the military. It was when you learned how to do it, you taught people how to do it, right? So we always joked around and said, see it once, do it once, teach it forever. That's kind of the way we went through. Any questions on this last one going through? So I'll go ahead and talk about the rank structure. And it goes through, you have E1 to E9 in the enlisteds, and you have O1 to O10 on the officer side. So the way I like to break it down, the easiest way I can explain this is that for the most part, there are exceptions to everything, right? There are exceptions to everything else that we do and everything, but for the most part, E1 to E3, okay, you guys see the cursor? So from E1 to E3 right here, coming up to here, this is, for the most part, the learning stage. You're an apprentice, and I think the Navy ones even say it. It'll say recruit, apprentice, and then you're qualified to do your job. Essentially, what that means is that you're not leading. You're not leading. You're following the whole time that's there, right? And a lot of times you don't know what you're doing. So a lot of times, the senior people that are above that don't have time to explain to everything exactly at that moment or whatever else is going on. So these are the people, even though you send them out for different jobs that they might be able to do, for different things, like a heavy responsibility in the Navy and the Marine Corps is the plane captain. So if the plane captain didn't sign off on the aircraft, pilot couldn't take it. They would have to wait till they either got another plane captain that signed off on it, or until they fixed whatever it was. So you had someone with very low rank that had a lot of responsibility. And once they learned how to do that, and once it was signed off and they went through a board and they said, okay, you're good to do this, then they were left alone. But for the most part, they took care of themselves. They were in charge of themselves. They were learning how to take care of themselves and how to lead themselves, right? All these different things. Now, in the Marine Corps, you have the Lance Corporal, or you have the Corporal and Lance Corporal. The Marine Corps definitely starts trying to do their leadership portions on the Lance Corps, right? Their E3s, they're actually most of the time leading other people. But for the most part, that doesn't happen for most of the other services until the E4 portion. So that E3, almost all the way up to E4, it becomes hey, if you don't know what to do, don't touch it, right? If you don't know what to do, don't do anything. Don't make it worse. E5, E6, E7, it starts to begin that, or E5 and E6, sometimes E4, like I said, depends upon the service. It starts to get that, okay, you need to start thinking about what you're doing. Right? Start going through, if you don't know what to do something. If you don't know what to do something. And then E7, E8, E9, it's not knowing what to do is not an option. There's always something that you have to do, right? So E4, E5, and 6, they're teaching you, if you don't know what to do something. We can always try to change it at the end or something else like that. E7, E8, E9, that's not an option. You have to do, make a decision, start going through there. When you get into the officer ranks, the same thing, E7, E8, E9 is what begins at O1 and O2, right? Gather in as much information as you can, but make a decision. O3, O4, O5, it starts to become way more prevalent. It becomes more you're affecting a whole lot more. So, and the networking from the very beginning, E7, E89, that's all about networking. They all know each other. They all start to go through and do all these different things. In the officer ranks, it's all about networking. It's all about who you know, what's going through. It's all about making those decisions, right? And then obviously you start getting into the 05, 06, 07 levels. Those are kind of CEO of regional areas, like regional management type things and everything. And then 08, 09, 010, those are really high level, even COO or CEO of huge international type organizations, right? Does that make sense? Anybody? I hope that's working for everybody. That's kind of the way that I use it. So the warrant officer, the bottom ranks down. Oops. So the bottom ranks down here, the warrant officer ranks, hardly ever happens in the Navy and Marine Corps, because it is very hard to become a warrant officer, right? You actually have to get into the E7 ranks to become a warrant officer, just to even apply to become a warrant officer. So you go from enlisteds, these are non-commissioned officers, to warrant officers who are also, or these are commissioned officers, or they're warrants. They receive warrants, not commissions. That's why they're called warrant officers. And then you have the commissioned officers who receive their commissions. And you can look those up later and, find out exactly what those are specific, but they are different. It's different standards upheld to the different U.S. code. So the warrant officer ranks are very rare, for the most part, for the Navy, Marine Corps, and sometimes even the Air Force. And when you see that on one of those people there in those ranks, or they tell you I was a warrant officer 5 in the Navy, that man could walk on water, or that woman could walk on water, because to get there, hardly ever happens. Very, very, they're like less than 1%. But that means they were the technical expert of whatever it was. So I was an aviation electronic technician for a little while. I was a lot of different things, but for someone to become an avionics warrant officer, they are top notch, just to get to that 01. And then once they get up higher, then they're probably writing the books at that point, writing the manuals for the Navy at that point. So that's why this rank becomes so important. And then the job titles become important, because you have the sergeant first classes here, right? So and the gunnery sergeants and chief petty officers, these are the people that are in charge of all these people that are right below them. So at some point, these people, depending upon what unit they could be in charge of 150, 300 people, right? And then as you go into E8 and E9, because sometimes if there's not an E9, it'll be an E8 that's in that position. These people can be in charge of anywhere, like a master chief of a carrier. You're talking 1,200 to 3,000 people that they are directly in charge of. Yeah, and then you start talking about in 08, rear admiral, upper half. You start talking 10,000 people, close to it. Can be if it's a carrier battle group. So you start talking about all these different people that they're in charge of for lives and different things like that. And there was always something going on. People are always getting hurt. People are always, whether it's training, whether it's stupidity, it could even be, volleyball. I was in a command. They actually said we could no longer play volleyball because so many people were getting hurt. And this was during our, recreational time and everything like that. They actually said, no more volleyball. You guys are hurting too many people. Don't know why, but so that's why the rank becomes so important. And here's the thing that I'll tell you. Most people that I'm talking to trying to receive service from don't give up anything about what rank I was. They don't care. They don't want to understand it. They don't want to do that. And this was my identity. And this was everything that I lived on. And there are still people to this day that you will find. I just received an email from someone who invited me to something, and in the middle he put Gunny. You know, they still identify with that, because by the time they're reaching these E89 ranks, they've probably done 20, 25, 30 years. So that's why it becomes so important on that. Even if you think about someone who only did 4 years, think about someone who did only 4 years. That's the entirety of and they're 25, 26 years old. That's the entirety of their adult life. Think about it. That's the entirety of their adult life. They turned 18, they went into the service for 4 years, they got out 2 years later. The majority of their life has been in the service at that point. So, yes. So yes, Melissa. And Melissa, I know where I know you from. My counterpart is Jackie Babb up at LifePath. That's how Charlene and I know you from up there. So, but yes, transferable skills are tremendous if identified. And the other thing that goes along with that is if they are recognized. I can't tell you how many Navy corpsmen that I know that were outstanding corpsmen, especially on the green side. They went with the Marines, and they went through independent duty corpsmen. They had to keep a goat alive for however long, no matter what happened to the goat, they had to keep it alive. And now they get out, and guess what? They can't get a job as a paramedic. They can't get a job, being a medical assistant somewhere, because there is nothing in or there was. I know they're starting some now. I know the Army has a program that they're starting to do. The Navy has started and stopped so many programs over the years that they don't through. But that key word there is transferable skills. And these are highly skilled individuals who cannot get their skills transferred into the civilian world. You're talking about people, because all of us have to go through a lifesaver, it's a combat lifesaver course. And we learn how to do different things like tracheotomies. You learn how to do all these little things, putting on tourniquets, doing all these things to save people's lives who, just got blown up, or they just got shot, or they just got through this and that. And then you go out, you're not supposed to do battlefield surgery on them, but you're doing more than the average bear, right? And then next thing you know, you come out and they're like, yeah, no, you can't even put a Band-Aid on someone. So, okay, I'll get off that horse. Any questions at all whatsoever? I still feel like I'm kind of, okay. So we are good on time. How to repel veterans. Just the different things. Trying to pretend to understand the military when you have no clue. There are differences in the different types of boot camps. Trying to compare the jobs with military jobs. Now realize this too. Sometimes the difference. What I mean by the differences in boot camp is some boot camps are very heavy on the infantry side of, infantry scale of doing things, and obstacle courses. And I mean, you look at some of these things, you're like, what the, you feel like you got gypped at the ride at Disneyland sometimes. You're just kind of sitting there going, why didn't I get that? And then other times you're like, thank God I didn't go through that. I mean, it all just depends. But there are differences in the different types of boot camps and the different types of jobs. And you hear a lot of people trying to compare their jobs with the military jobs, or their corporate life with the military life. And it's kind of like, really? But you can go home. You're gonna go home to your bed tonight and this and that. I mean, there's a huge difference in not being able to do something. Constantly thanking them for the service. That's a huge one that I hear from a lot of veterans. And it's not that it isn't appreciated, it's that there is a lot of people don't know how to respond. So I will tell you this: if you have a veteran who asks you how, people don't understand. I don't like hearing it was just my job. I was just doing my job. Why are they thanking me for my service? tell them to look that person straight in the eye and say, you were worth it. Say, thank you, you were worth it. And kind of put it back on them, you know. Instead of them putting it on them, you know, give it back to them. It kind of sets that tone and says, okay, I understand what I was doing was for your benefit. Yes, I thought it was for mine, but it wasn't necessarily. I went so that you didn't have to. That's essentially what I'm saying, you know. And another one was asking about shooting, killing, missions, and PTSD, even in other people that we know. I have so many people that go, hey, does that guy have PTSD? What does it matter? You know, what does it matter whether they do or not? Hey, do you know if they killed anyone over there? I'm not going to ask him. I don't think you should either. You know, there's all these different things. If they want to talk about it, they will. You know, yes, Vietnam veterans really don't know how to respond. Let's see, or they get very upset about that. You know, so is it okay to ask if they served in country? So the question would be that the way I would phrase it, the way I phrase it normally is, have you ever been deployed? And the answer I normally get is, no, I only made it to Okinawa, or no, I only made it to Germany or whatever. Within the military itself, there's a train of thought for people who have deployed downrange who say that's not a deployment, that's not this and that. But in reality, on your orders, it actually says forward deployed. So if you are serving in Germany or you are serving in Japan, it's actually called forward deployed, right? You're forward deployed because you are not on the continental U.S. So it depends on what you call a deployment. So I would say, you know, if it comes down to it and they say, no, I didn't, you know, or they say, yes, I deployed. And then I'll say, was it a combat deployment or was it a forward deployment? So that sometimes helps. Well, thank you. Okay, so why is it so hard to recruit veterans? Now, I will tell you this. So I get a lot of recruiters who get mad at me to talk about, you know, the lies from the recruiters. Well, here's the thing. From my point of view, from sitting on this end, I was lied to by my recruiter. My recruiter told me that I would get all these technical skills and that when I got out, I would be a top choice for any electronic company that wanted me. Guess what happened when I got out? Walmart's the only one that hired me. And they only hired me because they wanted a boot camp manager, right? I applied for door greeter and cart pusher at Walmart. That's how bad it got. And they hired me as a customer service manager, but that isn't what they wanted me to do. They wanted me to be in the back room and yell at all the people there to make sure everything got done. And guess what? We got it done, and I didn't have to raise my voice at all. Thanks to the leadership skills that I learned in the military. Because a lot of people, all they see is the movies or this and that, and all they see is the pictures that we showed earlier of, you know, people getting yelled at, people getting screamed at, people, you know. Just like out here, it's the same thing there. It's only a smaller cross-section of the population and how they're treated. I had a guy who I was told was a sack, a gunny sack. He just sat there, you know, didn't do anything. And that, you know, I'd probably have to get ready to kick him out at some point or another, right? That he wasn't, you know, he didn't follow directions. He didn't do anything. He just wanted to sit there and just cruise through his 4 years and be done. And in the mornings, I would assign all these things out to different people. And I would give him an assignment and say, you need to do this and that. And I would realize that he wanted, and then at the end, I would have assignments that whoever got done first, start working on this and get these things done, right? These are the lessers, but they still need to be done. And at the, you know, when I would check in later on or, you know, have them, you know, come through and talk about different things, you know, these people get this done, he hadn't done any of his stuff. But everything on the list over here got done. And after a while, I would go through and look who all did these. And it would come to find out it was him doing all of it. So I started to change it up a little bit, and I realized that if I said, I would say, you need to do this, you need to do this. Hey, do you mind doing this? And just using that one little change in there would all of a sudden, he would get everything that he needed done. So it's just like out here, everything else. Let's see, Liv asked, does it matter if you were combat or not? So that was for before, I believe, right? When we were talking up here, asking about shooting, killing, PTSD. So it doesn't a lot of times. So there's two schools of combat vets. Those that will tell you from the beginning, you don't even have to ask. They'll tell you straight out that they were a combat vet. And those who don't want to talk about it for the most part, right? So it was just part of the job. So if you're thinking that it might be pertinent to the situation, then yes, I would ask, do you consider yourself a combat vet? That's one of the ways that I ask them. And they may say yes, they may say no. They may consider themselves a combat vet, but they're not officially a combat vet. When I went to, when I was in Africa near Djibouti, we would go out. I was assigned to one of the Humvees that would go out with the Army, Navy guy with the Army. Yeah, tell me I wasn't. Good thing I got thick skin, right? So we would go out and go do this and that, and I was the only one who knew how to change frequencies on the radios that they used. And so we would go through and go out and do things like that. And there were times where they called me worse than that anyway. But we would go out and go do different things, and all this and that, and we would have to get issued body armor and weapons and go out and do all this other things. And sometimes we did come back home with bullet holes in the Humvees. But that was not my assignment there. That was not my, anything there. And because of the mission that we were doing there, no one got a combat action ribbon for it. But if you're getting, bullet shot at you, I think you're a combat vet, And then I went to Balad, and that changed everything. So, so I hope that answers that question. Let's see. So then you also have such things as a fast discharge process and no training to prepare. So what the fast discharge process means is that, especially the Army loves to do this. Not the Army itself, but a lot of Army folks love to do this. They go through, while they're still on active duty, they go through their, the last couple of months, they go through and do their disability physical. And when they get done with their disability physical, the day they get out, they get their disability. They start to get their disability pay from that day, right? Whatever their rating is, that's what they get. And so a lot of times they don't go to the VA. They just continue to get that disability rating until the VA catches up and says, hey, we haven't seen you in 3 years. We don't know whether you're still good or not. You must be healed because we haven't seen you in 3 years, so you must be healed. And either they get a letter saying that they need to come in and and recertify their comp and pen, or that they need to, or that their disability rating is getting dropped because obviously they must be healed because they haven't been seen in 3 to 4 years. So that's what that process is. So even if they do the fast discharge process, they still need to go through the VA, okay, to get that seen. And unless they are permanent and total, if it says permanent and total, then they don't ever have to get seen at the VA again. But if they haven't been seen at the VA in 2 years, they can get called up and either not lose their rating gets dropped, or they, for people who have disability ratings for PTSD, what did that mean? They wouldn't want to get better? I don't understand that question. Are you saying Can you come online and ask that question, Charlotte?
Well, I mean, this is certainly a mental health question. So you said that they can get immediate disability ratings, but like people that veterans that have PTSD related disabilities, they're being compensated for that disability, at some level. Well, if I start going to see a mental health professional in the private sector, they don't report back to the VA that, oh, this person is
Okay.
seeing significant reduction in the symptoms of PTSD. Well, that's if I'm going to a VA mental health professional.
Okay. So I got it now.
Require them to lose
I got it now. So what I would do what I do is I see someone out in town, right? I see someone who is not at the VA. My healthcare provider is through the VA. So I get basically every time I go for my annual physical, I take a letter from my mental health provider and say, here you go. So that, I am still seeing Domingo for the whatever that we had on there before. And so that way the VA knows and has that, and I'm still seeing them primary care wise, but the other way, but it still keeps the mental health side of it going also. Does that make sense? That's the way I do it, and it's a way of protecting your disability. Because Chris is right. There are a lot of veterans lose their disability or whatever else, and they don't understand why. They're like, I don't know why. They just took it away from me. Well, if you haven't seen them in 3 or 4 years, and you're supposed to be taking medication or this and that, and you're not taking it, guess what? They think you're healed. You're obviously functioning in life. Okay. Let's see. So then we also talk about sponsors and service companies. So like I talked about the sponsor on base before, that should be different ways of helping out for different organizations. So you guys as organizations, I challenge you to have a sponsor. Maybe someone who's gone through your program that can volunteer and talk to your veterans. That all they do is they come in, 3-4 hours at a time or whatever, and they talk up front with some of the vets, or they, if you have like a peer that can talk to them, different things, act like a sponsor and say, hey, this is their process, this is what they do, this is, kind of going through, and I mean, I know it's tough, and it's that walking that fine line, and most of us on this side have to treat our volunteers almost like employees, almost to the point where they have to fill out, job applications and things like that. But I guarantee you there are some vets out there who would love to be sponsors for you. If they went through your program and they love what you did for them and you helped them, they would love to help you and give back. So let's see, and help their vets make it through that whole process. So yes, let's see. Many descriptions so specific they don't think they qualify. A lot of times, like I said, if it's written down, it's written in stone, right? Because it's written in blood. And so they see there, they'll see like it'll say master's degree needed or this or that. Man, I can't tell you how many jobs I applied to, and they're like, man, we love what you got, and this and that. And they hired me even without a master's, or even without different things like that. There were times that I did let that get in the way for myself in the beginning, but once I learned that wasn't the case, it really helped out a lot. There are some veterans who don't feel like they're veterans. Like I said, some of them that don't feel like that all they did was admin. All they did was, I have a brother-in-law who did IT, and he's like, well, I'm barely he goes, I'm a Marine, but I'm barely a Marine. I didn't go do this, I didn't go do that, and I'm like, no, brother. You know, you went through, you did this, you did your job, you did your 4 years. It's not your fault you didn't get deployed to wherever. You know, it's not your fault that happened. It's you made a decision at 18 years old that you wanted to go do IT, and you know that you did it. You fulfilled your end. You know, time for them to do theirs. So there are some who, you know, don't feel like they're veterans. There are some veterans who don't feel like they're veterans because um, they were told they were by others in their units or even by spouses. I know some military couples that one deployed out and the other didn't, and they were told you're not a veteran, you know, by their spouse. So there are different reasons for that. No one has a budget to recruit for such a small segment of the population. They talked about that, right? So the veteran population is actually bigger than the active duty population. So active duty population is what, 0.46 or something like that, less than 5%, less than 0.5, less than half of a percent of the population. And the veteran population is, I think it's 7%. I can't remember those numbers now. So I'll throw that out there. But for some reason, 11 might be jumping in. But I will say it is a lot lower, and a lot of people don't have money just to recruit for that small segment. Any questions? Okay. So just to let you guys know, this is, you know, they talk about, you know, where veterans are living and all this and that. This is a good reputation of veterans are living. Here's what I want you to see. Okay. Look at where the elder concentration, elder only. So down here it says elder is 65 years and older. So the elder veterans, look where they're living at in Texas. You know, check out where they're living at in Texas. And then the working age and elder veteran concentration right here. This is us. It's an interesting thing, you know, and the other thing too, look at where, dang, holy smokes. Is that whole state veteran? Okay. And then where they're living at. And if you look, they're not living in Dallas County. They are in Fort Worth. Where'd my cursor go? Okay. So there's Dallas, Fort Worth. All right. And then if you look at that one and you look at those numbers, they're also up in Denton and in Collin County. There are a lot in Denton and Collin County. So this is one of the things that I also try to teach, you know, that also try to point out, you know, why veterans, well, they're, and somebody pointed out this to me before, and I don't know why, but it looks like a grenade. Looks like a grenade. And I was like, I need to change that, but you know what? It works, so I left it. They're mission orientated, they're honest, they're planners, they're active listeners, they're respectful, effective mentors, demonstrate integrity, encourage growth, exhibit qualities, equality, team players, establish goals, and are on time. These are the different things that we say that, you know, most veterans are, and they say for themselves. And especially these are the things that they learned in active duty, going through, you know, becoming that veteran. And then at certain points, some of these change. When you start to lose one, you start to lose quite a number of others. Because when one no longer becomes, you know, sad, what happens to the others? Who cares about the others? Okay, how to, oops. Okay, how to keep your veterans. One, train like you fight. In other words, do what you say you're going to do. Right? Go through, if this is the way you're teaching them that they need to do this stuff, and then they see you doing something different, they don't care about it. You just lost all kinds of credibility. And sometimes it begins from the beginning. Sometimes it begins as a, hello, what can I do for you? Right there, you're already implying that you can, whatever it is that I say that I need, you can take care of already. Okay. So one of the ways that we say, you know, talking to the greeting is saying, it's high. What are your needs? What are you looking for? What can I help you find? You know, all these different ways of being able to say kind of the same thing, but not commit yourself to, you know, what can I help you with? Well, I need this, this, and this. Oh, we don't do that here. Well, you just said you can help me. That makes sense. It's all about the mission. I already explained that already, you know, the whole thing, life, you know, work, mission. It's all about the mission. Even to the point that sometimes some veterans have an issue coming back and they love their families, but their families aren't the first thing anymore. You know, because their families weren't the first thing while they were in, for the most part. You know, I can't tell you how many times I would talk about something and or somebody above me. I try to make myself not ever say your family didn't come in to see back, or they weren't an issue to you. You know, your wife was an issue to you. Can't tell you how many times I heard that said. You know, to whoever it was. You know, I even heard someone tell that to a mother about their child. So, needs of the service. One team, one fight. So they see, so I'll tell you this, there are some places that I go to that when I'm talking to one person about this and that, and then I go into the next room, which is a different department, and they say something totally, completely different. And they talk about that person over there, like, you know, blah, 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 and this and that. And I'm going, are you the same organization? Are you the same unit or not? You know, at that point, I'm not doing anything with anyone, with either of them. So then, you know, I already mentioned the sponsor thing. That might be a good one. And then, you know, praise in public and reprimand in private. And so what I mean by that is, you know, that of course is said a very big to the employers of the groups and everything like that. But for the most part, that should be something that should be said to when you're telling them something that, like, something didn't go through, or something, you know, something didn't get paid for, a card got rejected, or something else like that. That should really, really, really not be out where it normally is, because that's most of the time where people lose it, and mostly that's just an embarrassment in front of others. And well, I got to show that I, you know, did this and that. So a lot of times, if you're in an enclosed setting, I'm not talking about closing the door or anything like that. I'm just talking about putting them in an enclosed setting and then talking to them and saying, hey, you know, this happened, this and that, we can't continue, whatever it is going through. So does any of that sound, you know, like I said, go through? There's a lot of different things that would go through, well-rounded, acronyms, that's a huge one. If you do use an acronym, please, 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 please state what it is. State what it is. Even nowadays, when I'm talking to others, I said MVPN, and somebody was talking to me about something, and they were talking IT stuff, and I'm like, what the? If you ever get a chance, look up MVPN. Apparently, it's huge in the tech world. It stands for multiple virtual network processing or something like that. Yeah. I'm like, no, that's not what we do. So feedback, and then, you know, jobs in the civilian world are basics in the military. And what I mean by that is that there are a lot of times in the military, you're doing your job, but you're not just doing your job, you're doing other jobs. You're doing they call them collateral duties, right? And sometimes you have $1 million inventory in your collateral duty, and it's not a primary job. But you're still just as liable for it as you would be for your primary job. So everybody has them, no matter what they are, no matter what goes on, you know, no matter what they're doing. If they had the proper leadership, they had a collateral duty. Any questions? All right. So all we're going to talk about now, because we talked about a lot of this stuff, is basically MVPN, what we do, and the peer support. So normally I like to look at this. Anytime I show an infographic like this, I like to ask people what word pops out in your mind. There's always a word that pops out in your mind, the first thing you see, or the one that really you keep going back to. And it's not always the big one that's right there, that goes through. So yeah, most people say support. Mine is passion. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm teaching, I feel passionate today. So okay, honesty. Ooh, I like that one. And to tell you the truth, I didn't even see honesty in here. So maybe I'm not being honest today. Oh, there it is. Talking safe. So what is MVPN? So we already talked about how we're qualified to do one-on-one peer support, group facilitations, community engagement activities, which is what we're calling this, volunteer opportunities, and resource connections. So if you ever have someone who needs some type of resources or looking for some type of resources, you have me here in Dallas County, you have Clark Gillette and Jackie Babb up in Collin County, you have Ginger and Casey Brown up in Denton County, and you have LeJean McDonald and his whole entourage out there in Tarrant County. He's got like 5 or 6 people working for him. I don't know how he got that many, but so then there's the basic peer skills, which we teach in different classes, and we try to teach some of our volunteers how to become group facilitators in their different groups. So if you ever want us to come in and teach a peer group, if you ever want to start a peer group, and we can come through and teach some of your volunteers how to be a peer group for veterans in the peer group, we facilitate the first couple or the first, however long it takes. And then once someone in that group steps up and is qualified, then we kind of step back and we come in regularly and just check on it and see how it's going. And these are the things that we teach them. And then, so veteran treatment court. Anybody here know what the veteran treatment court is? So it isn't just so Dallas County has one, City of Dallas has one, Fort Worth has 2, and Denton has one, and Collin County has one. There is one in Rockwall, there is one in Kaufman, and there's one in Cook County. So essentially what they are is, and they're all different, they are all different, so you can go through and do all these, get the training. You go through, it isn't just hey, you're a vet, don't do it anymore. It is an actual treatment. If whatever it is treatable, whatever offense it is dates back to something that was a treatable reason for doing it, then they can do it. I've known some people who got 90 AA meetings in 90 days for their first thing. And it's normally an 18-month to 2-year process for them to go through it. Each court is different. Some they have to plead in the beginning, and some they don't plead anything. And at the end of it, most of them can get expunged. So it's a good way of going through and not being charged with that. And so if you guys are looking for your peer support, peer service coordinator in your area, go to www.milvetpeer.net, and you can find your PSC in your area. And then if you need me, here's my info. Now, Brittany has put in the chat your a link sending you to the, well, you explain it, Brittany.
So that link is going to connect you to a virtual evaluation form through Microsoft Forms, and that'll automatically, in real time, give me your feedback that I will share with Domingo so that he can brag about his presentation to needs to answer to. So, but it's also required for anybody that's going to be claiming for or requesting a certificate of completion. If for some reason you're having some technical glitches, I know we had some issues with some people signing in, Email me. Don't forget the number 2 in my email address. There's 3 of us. So brittany.miller2@uhsinc.com, and I'll give you a physical form that you can then scan and send back to me. But I just want to say, Domingo, I personally learned a whole bunch. So thank you so much for your time today. And you took it all the way up to like 2:30.
I know. Well, I'm a talker.
That's the military side coming in.
Any questions? Well, I did answer most of the questions that came up on the chat, so that kind of helped. But if there is any questions now, yes. Hold on, I need to do this again one more time. There you go. So if you need to, you can hit the print screen and print it, and then good luck finding it. But any questions at all whatsoever? Okay, well, I'm happy I was able to answer whatever questions that did come up. That is my phone number if you do need that, or that is my email address. So if you need that, you can send it to me there, different things like that. But other than that, I'm done, unless you guys, and I have no problem hanging out for a little bit and chatting. We got this this chat room for another 22 hours.
No. Very valuable information. Thank you.
Okay.
And then I know I was getting some emails too offline with people requesting the links or the contact info, or if I'm going to be emailing the recording of this. So please, Sherlin's information was at the very top of the chat. And then just, I don't know if you have a timeline